Understanding the term creation. Explanation from Semjase, excerpt from Contact 18, Thursday, the 15th of May, 1975, 9:34 p.m. pp. 150, 154, Pleiadian Pleiarans Contact Reports, Conversations, Volume 1.
Before we discuss other things today, I would like to proceed with the spiritual teaching, as it is the most important thing of all. The human being should try to react to the word or the term creation as if something very beautiful or good is being referred to, through which a change should be effected in his thinking. Because as long as this does not happen, he has not recognized creation as it really is. But how can the word and the name creation attain such a deep significance for the human being that a change in his entire psychological way of behaving occurs, in his emotional awareness, his awareness of life, his ways of reacting, if he does not constantly and repeatedly contemplate the nature of creation? The human being should try quite simply to bring certain characterizing words, which are applicable in regard to the nature of creation, like ever-present, almighty, and all-knowing, into association with the word or the designation creation. The everyday human being and everyone, the so-called atheist, the egoist and materialist, and the agnostic, find the word creation highly uninteresting. Yet why? To them it is entirely unknown, and they have no idea what creation essentially is. But so it is with very many human beings with the term creation. Billions of people who are misled by religion do not understand the word creation. When they pronounce the unreal religious title God, then they have gone astray with the view that creation is named thereby. Yet what an evil, false teaching that is. Therefore, it is very important to know as much as possible about the nature of creation and ascertain it so that the word becomes meaningful, raises one inwardly, and leaves an impression as soon as it is heard. Experience reveals that creation is infinite beauty, a beauty above all beauty, boundless, intensive happiness without end, wisdom, knowledge, ability, truth, and absolute certainty. Once that is recognized by the human being, then he instantly traces every one of his joys back to its origin, to the infinite joy of creation. Wherever he sees something beautiful, be it a flower, an animal, or a human being, or anything else, he thus instantly brings it into association with the infinite beauty of creation itself. Wherever the human being sees cognition reach expression, in this or any form, in an impressive and exalted manner, then he knows that it has its roots in the endless cognition which is creation. Wherever life stirs, be it even in just the tiniest being, in a creature such as, for example, the microbe, there, behind this life, he glimpses the infinite, the eternal, and the creational. From that, he attempts to deepen and expand his understanding and feeling by contemplating the nature of the creational and its inseparable presence, at any time and in any space, in many kinds of ways, in daily life and experience. Creation exists in every human being as a fragment of itself. Once this thought has deeply penetrated the human being and become his experience, then any fear and all doubt in him disappear. Once he knows that creation is all-knowing and almighty, then he gains inner peace and security and is immune from stupid thoughts and wrong feelings. Repeated contemplation about the ever-present, the truth, wisdom, and the ability and knowledge of creation as constantly eternal, as dignity and value, allows the word and the designation creation to become something very meaningful in the human being, something which evokes transformations in the feelings and transformations in his manner of thinking. The more his intelligence is effective in this direction, the more it gains radiating light, the more powerful his personality becomes, and the more blessed his entire life and work. Again and again, the human being who lives in clarity of consciousness produces in himself anew the strong, spiritual, fine, sensitive feeling that the creational is far more real than that which his body feels. This spiritual, fine, sensitive feeling incessantly rules the human being who lives for the spirit. The creational takes possession of his consciousness, whereby his way of thinking is full of peace, strength, joy, knowledge, wisdom, truth, and hope. All the measures which the normal human being grasps in his material intellectual thinking, in order to attain peace, happiness, and strength, always show themselves as deceitful, while this constant controlledness of the human being who is living according to spirit is pulsed through with the dynamic power of creation. The human being who lives for spirit is very dynamic in all things. He incessantly attempts to reach his fulfillment as quickly as possible. Therefore, as long as he lives, he uses the time, with all the energy available to him, for devoting himself to creational ability. He will never allow this undertaking to be lost. Everything possible can happen in the course of time, yet his desire for the creational will never cease in him. He can encounter hindrances. He can suddenly have no sense and taste any more for necessary material things, yet he never loses the taste and sense for creation, because he knows that creation embodies true being. Only those human beings who fight hard for consciousness goods and progress, and spiritual goods and progress, and for knowledge, truth, logic, wisdom, and love, harvest the spirit's and consciousness's enormous fruits, because these do not simply fall into their laps. First, before the first results can be obtained, it is necessary to learn the spiritual intellectual manner of thinking, that is to say, the path of creational thinking, and to recognize its absolute correctness and certainty. Indeed, once these first results come about, then the cognizant one steps onward with great steps and expands himself in spirit and consciousness to a factor of might. Only through this do already known facts, knowledge, truth, logic, wisdom, and love, which first, however, must be gained through hard work, become self-evident. Yet the path does not end at this point, because further seeking, further searching, further development, and further recognition lead into the boundless duration of time. In the course of time, everything possible may happen which keeps the human being from planned action. Yet the human being who lives in accord with spirit knows no bounds and does not allow himself to be kept from his determinations by any kind of events or bad future outlooks. For him, the future already exists in the present, so everything must be done here and now in order to achieve the highest spiritual state and highest state of consciousness. He does not know the fear of the future, nor fear about the future because they only exist in a material intellectual way of thinking, but never in spiritual intellectual thinking, in which the future is as present as the present itself. Thereby the human being who lives in accord with the spirit can, and may, solve the problems of tomorrow and the next day already, here and now, and steer them along the desired paths. To think for and with, the spirit brings only advantages to every life form. Therefore, the human being should raise himself more and more, through intensive seeking and searching, into the state of spiritual thinking and into the knowledge about creational truth and wisdom. He should again and again create in himself the strong spiritual fine sensitive feeling that something is there, namely the truth of creation which gives him immeasurable power and frees him from unreal assumptions. The human being should always, again and again, create within himself the strong, spiritual, fine, sensitive feeling that he is in the sea of creational light, its wisdom, its knowledge of truth, logic, and love, which alone entirely enables the being of life for him. The joy of the human being who is turned towards creation exists as a result of attesting to his veneration for the creational and creation, in that he accepts the almighty will in the creational laws and makes the absolute certainty of these laws his own destiny and utilizes them to good effect. He expresses his dedication to the laws through the learning and utilization of all spiritual facts and facts pertaining to the consciousness, but never through belief, assumptions, serving, and submissiveness. The only way to learn is through unremitting effort and striving to obtain higher spiritual cognitions and higher cognitions pertaining to the consciousness, and by applying the abilities which have unfolded through this. Of decisive significance thereby are patience and endurance and the development of higher understanding, recognition and application of cosmic and universal love, deepening of spiritual knowledge and ability, and deepening of knowledge and ability pertaining to the consciousness, as well as the switching off of material intellectual thought powers such as egoism, materialism, pride, envy, greed, and jealousy, and so forth, because only this guarantees the recognition and following of the creational laws. The human being who thinks spiritually constantly makes the effort to direct creation to himself and to make it recognizable in himself by means of his attempts to make possible that which is impossible for normal human beings, and indeed with success. Day after day, month after month, and year after year, the human being who is devoted to the spirit calls upon the creational and thereby gains knowledge, wisdom, love, logic, truth, and power, until he finally experiences the creational in himself and is able to get useful value from it, whereby it becomes more real to him than the feelings experienced by his body. While he associates with other human beings and speaks with them, he sees before him only the creational. While he sees others before him, he sees only the creational in them, because for him, the creational is always in the first position. For him, the creational is the greatest of all things, for which reason everything within him is confronted with the creational, and material things are no longer able to awaken longing in him. He is no longer at the mercy of material temptations, because that which is concealed within him as spiritual knowledge and ability pertaining to the consciousness is his dialogue partner and his guide. He speaks and converses with it, and he lives with it in the given laws of creation. This way of living means being in truth, and this being is incomparably more beautiful than this universe's most beautiful manifestation. Nothing is able to tempt such a developed human being any longer, not the greatest wealth of the world, nor a death threat expressed to him by creatures disposed to evil. His inner wealth in the creational is inexhaustible and imperishable, and nothing is able to awaken any kind of fear in him, because that with which he lives and which enlivens his being is infinite might. Therefore, nothing is able to mislead him to untruth and falseness, because his entire being is in the creational cognition of infinite truth. Nothing may wrongly lead him into the darkness of misleading thoughts from external powers, because each split second of his spiritual intellectual thinking is infinite light. Nothing is able to change his being sense of truth or make him unhappy, because he lives in the being of creation and in its sense, and he lives in infinite joy. If the human being, however, has a bad or negative attitude regarding the spiritual things of life, himself and creation, then nothing at all will flourish for him. Even a very favorable circumstance, which would otherwise be very valuable, becomes a source of misfortune and strife for him if his attitude is only material intellectual, and this form of his thoughts and feelings also influences the environment. Even if the concerned human being pursues the best intentions, however good they may be, the result in this case will be entirely negative. However, for the human being who lives in accord with spirit, everything always constitutes the right circumstances for inner growth and is a very good opportunity, in every form, to pay tribute to that which is creational. Truly, only the human being who constantly carries and maintains high and noble spiritual thoughts and spiritual feelings in himself is great, and one can only name as creational the human being who constantly lives and thinks in the consciousness of the creational in himself. That means that human beings who are great in terms of their material intellect can be just as completely uncreational and, spiritually, absolutely insignificant, just as peace instigators can be, along with saints of religion, helpers in emergency, misery, and sickness, and, not least, those who stand at the very front in wars and so forth, and carry out medical services and so forth. 71. Those kinds of human beings are mostly only driven by thirst for adventure, by pity and self-pity and other wrong material intellectual thoughts, and the feelings resulting from them, without the slightest recognition of possessing the creational within themselves. Very often they are misled through unreal religions which preach false neighborly love and equally false divine teachings and formulas for submissiveness. Yet what is the difference between such life forms and that of the human being who lives in accord with the Spirit? In general, the normal human being allows himself to be guided and conquered by base material intellectual sentiments. If he does have good feelings, then they are never constant and soon disappear again to again make room for lower sentiments. He who, on the other hand, is a human being living for spirit, never allows even the smallest creational inclinations to subside. Rather, he grasps them and infinitely expands them. Base inclinations find no anchorage in him, because the waters of wisdom and knowledge in him are too deep to enable a base and short anchor chain to reach the bottom. The human being who lives in accord with spirit constantly attempts always, and under all circumstances, to maintain himself in the vibrational realm of creational inclinations. Should this be endangered by some kind of influences, then he calls on the highest power of creation and thus protects himself, with its highest vibrational power, from the negative. He proceeds in this manner until the creational essence in him has created the absolute certainty of defense against the negative. The human being is always the bearer of something or other. Many bear oppressive feelings within themselves, others bear grief, worries, problems, hopes, and other thoughts of a material intellectual nature. Also, fears and imaginations of images of any kind, good or ugly, belong in his material intellectual thinking. But the human being who lives in accord with the Spirit is a bearer of the creational of the spiritual. He is a bearer of creation, a conscious bearer of spirit, because he constantly carries the knowledge and ability of the creational laws in himself. And the more the old nature of the material intellectual thinking would like to make him the bearer of its unlogic, the more he works intensively to make the creational in himself prevalent and to anchor it securely. He immediately transforms into creational power and wisdom even the most negative thoughts which come and want to destroy his spiritual intellectual thinking. In this way, he makes everything creational and carries it within himself as a power block. Thereby, he is a walking temple of creation. The intelligence of human beings living for creation becomes ever more spiritual and advances ever deeper into spiritual consciousness. The human being who lives in accord with spirit penetrates ever deeper into all things with his cognitive faculty and comprehends the warmth of the fire of the creational presence in everything. Thereby, the spiritually thinking human being recognizes and is conscious of the power and the truth of the creational presence everywhere. That which therefore remains unrecognized by the everyday perception of the senses is perceived with the spiritual consciousness by the human being who lives in accord with creation. He therefore always sees in all things and life forms the creational presence and the application of the creational laws. He possesses a spiritual image of the power of creation's presence, and he dedicates all the precious energies of his life and being to creational knowledge, its truth, power, and wisdom, and thereby to the ability of his fragment of creation, which lives within him, his spirit. The material life on earth is like a fleeting game, an evaporating phenomenon. But behind it lies the eternal and timeless truth, the spirit, the creational presence, and the reality of creation. This creational reality bears within itself all realms and spheres pertaining to the capacity for wisdom. It is this which remains, the timelessly constant and imperishable. This is no game, rather it is eternal and timeless truth and wisdom, knowledge, freedom, love, logic, and ability, relative perfection, absolute certainty. Very many people are afraid to live in the sense of creation, and they think, and are of the opinion, that they must remain only with the one who is supposed to take their fear of death from them, with a god of a religion who, in intentional false teaching and for his very own benefit, has promised to take away their fear of death if, in erroneous belief, they submissively believe his lies, whereby they are enslaved by him and lose their freedom of consciousness. The constant repetition of this religious false teaching causes the believers to find imagined and deceitful fulfillment, and subject themselves to an evil delusion which prevents all their rationality pertaining to consciousness, whereby also their spiritual intellectual thoughts are hindered and oppressed and enslaved. Only very few human beings are not afraid to live in the sense of creation, and know that this alone guarantees life and being, because this thereby fulfills the creational laws, and they, in turn, make life and being into life and being.
Everything that you say sounds so understandable and logical, if only the human beings could grasp it.
They certainly will, yet it will not be overnight. You and your group lay only the foundation stones for an avalanche, which will only start to roll at a very much later time.
I know. We have already often spoken about that. But now I have yet another question, which was directed at me.
Translator's notes. Harry, translator's note, please refer to the end of this document to read an explanation about the unconventional and strange English word choices and the German words used in this translation. Please refer to footnotes for definitions of German words. Translated by Vivian Legg and Dyson Devine. Revision. November 2010 by Vivian Legg and Dyson Devine in collaboration with Vibke Walder. Translator's note, FIGU approved translators are obliged to make use to the best of their abilities of certain English word choices as determined by Billy Meyer and by FIGU members who have been working on the Goblet of Truth translation in consultation with Billy. These words are recorded in the FIGU Online Dictionary, https://figu. org/dict/ For this reason, the reader may encounter in this translation some English choices for German words which will seem quite peculiar. These choices are based on Billy Meyer's unique knowledge of the original and true meaning of German terms and many English terms, especially those which pertain to the spiritual teaching, which reveals that often well-known words, in both languages, are misleading when used in the conventional sense. In addition to this, in some cases, the German word must be carried over into the English text, since no adequate corresponding English word or phrase can be found at all. Wherever this occurs, a corresponding footnote has been added to attempt to define the word for the reader. Since some of these German terms describe concepts which are only being described for the first time in this detail for Earth humanity, there is still much work to be done before adequate explanations can be found to aid the reader. This is all the more reason why it is important for a serious student of this teaching to, at least, strive to learn the German language. Please continue to consult the FIGU Online Dictionary to keep up to date with any ongoing revision of the terms used in this translation.